From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
This is the AT&T Network, a living, breathing intelligence bringing people together to bring new ideas to life.
Look, it's so simple.
In here, the right minds from inside and outside the company come together to work on an idea, adding to it from the road, improving it in the cloud, all in real time.
Good idea.
It's the AT&T Network, providing new ways to work together so business works better.
Issue 1, Obamacare scores. Individual mandate upheld. So ruled the U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday. The individual mandate is the core provision of President Obama's overhaul of the healthcare system. The mandate requires that Americans must buy health insurance. If they do not, they must pay a tax penalty. In a 5-4 decision, with Chief Justice John Roberts writing the majority opinion, the court reasoned that Congress has the right to impose taxes, and the health mandate can be construed as a tax. Quote, because the Constitution permits such a tax, it is not our role to forbid it or to pass upon its wisdom or fairness, unquote. So wrote Chief Justice John Roberts. Question. 26 states have sued the federal government over the health care law called the Affordable Care Act. How will this ruling go over with those states and the American people at large in those states? Perhaps you can.
Overall, I don't think it's going to go over very well, but John Roberts has just given Barack Obama a signal victory, and he may have given Barack Obama a second term as President of the United States. John, 4 of those justices were ready not only to overturn the individual mandate, but the entire Obamacare law. Had John Roberts joined them, the whole thing would be gone now, and Barack Obama would have nothing to show for his first 4 years, basically, but a bad economy. I think, John, go ahead. You say that notwithstanding the poll numbers, 37% is the percentage of Americans with a favorable view of the law versus 44% with an actively unfavorable view of the law. Here's what John Roberts did, John. I understand his sentiment. It's a conservative sentiment. He says, we ought not to be deciding these things. The elected representatives should. But this was such an open and shut case of a seizure of power by the federal government that he should have acted on it, but he failed to act. And as a consequence of that, I think, as I say, John Roberts may well have reelected Barack Obama. He put the word tax under the microscope and called it a tax. He got enough out of it to take the position he's taken. But a lot of thought went into this tax code before it was formed, a lot of deliberations. And who knows whether or not he has caught the essence of tax the way he describes it.
I would point out that the health insurance plan that Governor Romney signed into law in Massachusetts has a similar penalty if you can afford health insurance and choose not to buy it. And Governor Romney called it a personal responsibility incentive. So I think I'll go with that language, and I commend the Chief Justice for crafting a legal ruling that respects majority rule. And he did the same thing on the immigration case this week, and I think he's gone a long way towards rehabilitating the court's reputation as a body that is not just predictable along political lines. And as for the 26 states that sued, I would imagine they're all going to start putting the machinery in place to get the insurance exchanges up and running, because, you know, we're in a country, rule of law, the Supreme Court has spoken.
Yeah, well, we don't want to debate. I don't think we want to debate that here. It's a done deal.
Well,
let's look at the effects of it. 105 million people are the number of Americans who no longer have a lifetime limit on their insurance coverage because of this. What do you say to that?
I'd say that the conservatives and Republicans and people who believe in economic freedom have 3 shots at this. First, they have the court shot to take down Obamacare. That failed. The next shot comes in November, if Mitt Romney is elected. And the third shot is the math. Because the math of Obamacare over the long term does not work, because it does not address the fundamental problem driving health care costs, which people are not spending their own dollars on insurance. They're spending someone else's money. Therefore, they do not pay close attention to how that money is being spent, and too much is spent.
Let me put a dollar figure on that. The estimated 10-year gross cost of insurance coverage expansion under this is $1.5 trillion. $1.5 trillion. What are the American people going to say when they see that coming out of their pocket?
Well, I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know what the mechanism is that they're going to have to speak about it other than elections. That's the way our system works. But I want to mention another mandate which is really important. There's something called employer responsibility, and that means every company with 50 employees or more is going to have to buy a certain kind of insurance. That is going to be much more expensive than what they've been doing, and that is going to add literally $1.79 per hour to all of these employees that they are hiring, and this is going to greatly diminish the number of basically low-level, low-income jobs that are going to be available in our economy.
You're replacing private sector jobs with government bureaucrat jobs. Those are the only jobs it's going to create.
Let's move this on. President Obama, right after the High Court ruling, said this, in part.
They've reaffirmed a fundamental principle that here in America, in the wealthiest nation on earth, no illness or accident should lead to any family's financial ruin. I know there will be a lot of discussion today about the politics of all this, about who won and who lost. That's how these things tend to be viewed here in Washington. But that discussion completely misses the point. Whatever the politics, today's decision was a victory for people all over this country whose lives will be more secure because of this law and the Supreme Court's decision to uphold it.
How does that impress you, Mr. Petrakoukas?
I'm pretty sure that's not what the court said. The court said that, listen, this law is not unconstitutional. Chief Justice Roberts did not say it was good law. He said, listen, I'm not ruling whether this is good law. Congress will have to rule that. I'm not ruling whether this is smart law. Up to the American people. And I think the American people, in poll after poll, have said they think this is bad law.
What you said is quite clear. The cost of this thing is what is not being dealt with. The cost is going to be somewhere well over $1 trillion. It's going to chew up all of the available assets that our federal government brings to deal with a lot of other problems.
It bent the curve the wrong direction.
I'm not saying we shouldn't do something about health care. This is just not the way to deal with it. It is just going to cost a fortune, and nobody's got the finances. It's going to destroy state governments. It's going to destroy the federal government's ability to do a lot of things.
We have a huge debt crisis. We created a brand new entitlement.
If you list the various benefits in the Affordable Care Act, the fact that insurance company can't kick you off if you have a pre-existing condition, and there are many other things, I think it's very important to many people in this country, and it is about time that we recognize that health care is a right.
You can do that without Obamacare.
Excuse me. Is a right, and Obamacare is not perfect, and it will be revisited many times, but it is a beginning. And if you try to take away and dismantle this, you will create pandemonium in the insurance market.
Okay, let's pat in.
John, the only way we can change this thing, the only possible way, I believe, and the math is way down the road, is you got to not only elect Mitt Romney president, you got to have a Republican Senate and a Republican House. And because it is now a tax, you can do it with 50% of the Senate. That is the only hope you got. But I'll tell you what that does, John. That energizes the Republican base, which is enormously energized now, but we're still 4 months out from the election.
You can energize.
I don't know whether I gave you this statistic, but I want to give it to you now. The projected number of Americans remaining uninsured now because of this development is 27 million.
It adds $30 million, 30 million people when it is finally implemented. Nobody is saying it's perfect. It's the hugest step that any president certainly has been able to take.
But it's not a financially sustainable step.
The Congressional Budget Office says it lowers the deficit.
Folks also said that Medicare costs $10 billion right
now. There are pilot programs trying to get at end of life issues,
highly
experimental, which the Republicans say call death
Well, come back.
No, it's not experimental. Our debt. That's $15 trillion.
Issue 2. Romney responds.
What the court did not do on its last day in session, I will do on my first day if elected President of the United States. And that is, I will act to repeal Obamacare. Let's make clear that we understand what the court did and did not do. What the court did today was say that Obamacare does not violate the Constitution. What they did not do was say that Obamacare is good law or that it's good policy. Obamacare was bad policy yesterday, it's bad policy today. Obamacare was bad law yesterday, it's bad law today. Let me tell you why I say that. Obamacare raises taxes on the American people by approximately $500 billion. Obamacare cuts Medicare by approximately $500 billion. And even with those cuts and tax increases, Obamacare adds trillions to our deficits and to our national debt and pushes those obligations on to coming generations.
Mr. Romney also said Obamacare means 20 million Americans will lose the coverage they like. Obamacare is a job killer. Obamacare makes the government too big, too intrusive.
If we want to get rid of Obamacare, we're going to have to replace President Obama.
Question. Rate Romney's reaction. Did it have merit or was it rhetoric? James Pethokoukis.
No, I had merit. He's certainly right on the facts that at least immediately, if you're going to want to replace Obamacare, it's not going to happen now. It's not going to happen in Congress now unless he's elected and gets a Republican Senate, a Republican House. Then it could possibly be repealed. But I wish he would have taken the opportunity to talk a little bit about his own health care plan, though.
What?
Well, it certainly does dramatically accentuate the fundamental problem facing this country, which is that we are insolvent. It's just a question of time when everything hits the fan. We have $1.5 trillion additional costs. We're going to have to find a way to deal with that. Somehow or other, it's just going to chew up almost everything, both at the state level and at the federal level. And this is a critical issue for this country. We are sitting here. We're going to become Europe by the time this thing gets into a full-blown expenditure program. This is crazy. I'm not saying we shouldn't have a health care program. I believe we should. But this one did not deal with the economics of it. And we are going to end up paying for it.
Well, before we get to being Europe, I would point out that we are paying top dollar prices for people who use emergency rooms now for their primary care. And so the system really does have to be reordered, and this is a beginning to do that. Secondly, Mr. Romney, I mean, you can't make this up. He created this plan in Massachusetts. He has a penalty, AKA tax, that he endorsed in Massachusetts. The Massachusetts plan is doing very well. It hasn't fulfilled any dire expectations. He is a flawed messenger to be carrying this forward in a political campaign. He can energize Pat Buchanan and everyone in the base. That's not enough to win. Not enough to win an election.
What's Romney's answer to your criticism?
He said the plan was for Massachusetts, but not the rest of the country.
The plan was designed for a state, Massachusetts, not for other states.
Well,
that's what he said.
Is Massachusetts that different from every other state?
In terms of the economic health of the health industry in
John,
Massachusetts, it's in a totally different place.
Okay, Republicans' icy rage.
We have seen this law increase costs, and we are committed to changing that. And that's why when we return the week of July 9th, I've scheduled a vote for total repeal of the Obamacare bill to occur on Wednesday, July 11th. And in that way, we can clear the way towards trying to, again, focus on accomplishing a healthcare future that is premised upon patient-centered care, lowering costs, and affording better access.
He's going to initiate next week a repeal. What's the story on a repeal?
It's meaningless what he's doing right here. He's going to pass it in the House, send it to the Senate.
What is it?
This is the repeal of Obamacare.
It's an annulment of the action that has...
the House is going to pass it, John. The Senate is not. This depends, as I mentioned. Romney's got to be elected president. The Republicans have to control the Senate.
Why would the Senate not pass it?
It's Harry Reid's Senate, for heaven's sakes.
You mean it's a Democratic Senate?
It's a Democratic Senate.
So this is going to await the election, and if the Senate is overturned, then we might get the
You got to
repeal.
have Romney, and you got to have a Senate and a House.
51 votes
It's
for
51
repeal?
because it's a tax.
Right.
And you can deal with taxes with 51%.
So you think this is an unrealistic expectation? Is
Right-
it for rhetoric?
right now-
or is this guy
Right now
earnest? And is he beyond the...
Right now, it is meaningless.
Right, and
what
not
he's doing is
Meaningless?
It's meaningless.
Would you have not initiated a
Let
repeal
him
if you were
vote-
he?
Let them vote for it. It's
Never re-
irrelevant. It's
Suppose the Senate gets the message from the people
No.
that this thing is not working,
No,
They've
and
got-
it
They
percolates.
know it's not working. They're not
Suppose
going
he
to
brings
repeal
it up again
Obamacare.
later in the year.
A Democratic Senate's going to
Are
overturn
you,
it also
Obamacare.
gives Democrats
prohibited
on
from
record
bringing
for an
up a
unpopular
repeal
bill.
later in the year?
You can bring it up all you want. Unless Harry Reid is gone, you're not going to get anywhere.
Democrats vote for it.
Exit question. This is a victory for President Obama. Will it be a short-term victory or a long-term victory? Pat Buchanan.
I'm afraid it's a long-term victory.
It puts him in the history books, and it puts this country on the right track, and I think it redounds to his benefit in November. The country does not want another long, bloody battle over health care. Not that I'm in the business of giving advice to Republicans. If they want this election to turn on the economy, they ought to get off this topic real fast and accept the ruling of the land.
Quickly.
Short-term, Obamacare encapsulates everything that's wrong with Obamonomics. High taxes, more regulation.
It's a political victory for Obama, but an economic disaster for
Short
this
term or
country.
long term?
Short term. I believe it's going to really have an adverse impact on the economy.
Short-term win. Issue 3. High Court on immigration.
Today is a day when the key components of our efforts to protect the citizens of Arizona, to take up the fight against illegal immigration in a balanced and constitutional way, has unanimously been vindicated by the highest court in the land.
Arizona Governor Jan Brewer applauded another U.S. Supreme Court decision. On Monday, the High Court ruled on the state of Arizona and its law that deals with illegal immigrants. The High Court ruled that police officers can continue to check the immigration status of people they stop. That means if someone is stopped for any offense, major or minor, and cannot provide proof of legal residency, then the police officer has the right to check on that person's legal status.
Question, how big of a victory was this for Arizona Governor Brewer, and how big a victory for President Obama? Eleanor Cliff.
This was a total loss for the governor of Arizona. The Supreme Court basically gutted the Arizona law. They said that immigration is a matter for the federal government and states should not overstep. They left the papers, please provision, but they issued a warning. First report that anybody is racially profiled, they will invite another case. And they also, they did a conference call with reporters, the administration did, and basically said when the police call to check someone's immigration status, if they find, unless they've got a felony, they're not just deporting people because they're illegal. So the Arizona lost and has huge implication on Alabama and other states with similar laws. This was the victory for John Roberts.
Obama here has also declared a de facto amnesty for all illegal aliens under 30 years of age, if you've got a good, clean record, you've served in the military, which is something that you can do as a presidential thing, but he just declared he's not going to enforce the law.
Prosecutorial discretion, Pat.
He's
And
ordered
if you
him
have
not to
limited resources,
No, it's not.
if you have limited resources, you
law
don't
is the
deport
law.
people.
He tells you a
who
group
are-
of people I'm not going to enforce the law against?
You cannot do that. You
preposterous.
cannot
It's
say
not
that.
preposterous, and they get to apply for a 2-year work permit.
But how
What
can
would
the
you do?
president
You would
decide who he's
deport all
gonna
these
force-
people?
No.
It's
How
well
can you
within this
decide-
constitutional
how can
right.
he decide whom he's going to enforce the law against? Not these folks, but those folks?
He himself said several times before that he couldn't change this because that's
Exactly.
the law, and the president must enforce the law, not ignore it. He himself, Obama said this twice.
I don't notice any constitutional challenges, fellas.
Okay.
Immigration,
he's on
immigration
strong
as
ground.
an issue, believe it or not, does not score very high on the American Think Board. Out of 15 issues facing this country that are of serious moment, immigration ranks as an issue of which there is major concern, according to that sequence of 1 to 15, as what number?
14.
What do you think?
Guns on the list, and you tell me, let me tell you something. You start to restrict guns, it'll be right up there very high, and people will run away from that. John, that group of issues you got are sort of general things. There are cultural, moral, social issues, and issues like gun control on which people vote. And immigration's one of them.
Which one? Is it 14th on a 15 register?
I think that's too low. I would put it in the one.
So do I. But when I saw the stat, I saw the stat.
I would put the economy and all the issues under it number one. I'd put immigration 2 or 3.
You want to speak to this? Hold on.
Listen, I would put immigration very high on that list, but I would put the need for skilled, high-skilled immigrants, entrepreneurs who want to come to this country. That's a big part of our economic growth the past 30 years has come from those folks, which the president could have talked about, but he chose to talk about something else.
Exit question. How does this immigration ruling play politically for President Obama, and how does it play politically for candidate Mitt Romney? Pat Buchanan.
I think what Obama did on the DREAM Act, I would agree it's to his benefit with the Hispanic community dramatically. I think
they're clustered in a few states. They bring about 13 electoral votes with them, the Latinos.
No,
You're constantly making too much.
That is ridiculous, John. Colorado, states like Arizona.
Yeah, I'm including Colorado.
California's gone, but Colorado's a
net
state
13 is what they bring.
Hispanics are very heavy now down in North Carolina.
How many electoral votes do you think depend upon the Latino vote?
I don't know that they depend, but it could affect a whole passel of votes. I would say 50.
It could swing. It could swing a number of states. Right. The president has a 40-point lead over Mitt Romney, and there's a huge generational divide in attitudes towards immigration. Younger people think diversity is great. Older people are threatened. So Obama has a 2-to-1 edge with younger people.
Let's try this issue. Foreign policy. To what extent would foreign policy issues appear and be reasonably prominent in the upcoming presidential election about 5 months away?
They could be decisive in this sense, John. The negotiations with Iran over its nuclear program are in very bad shape in Moscow, and if these collapse, there's a real possibility that either the Israelis would strike Iran before November, or that Barack Obama might get into a confrontation with Iran, in which case my view has always been if there's a confrontation with a foreign regime, especially the Iranians who are deeply unpopular, I think it would benefit Obama. I think they're going to stay out of Syria, though.
What's the likelihood of Iran trying to resist Israel? What's the likelihood that Iran is anything else but ironic right now? That is, they want a settlement of the issue quietly and peacefully. Isn't that the going wisdom?
I think they do want a settlement of the issues as long as they're allowed to enrich uranium, but Israel doesn't want them to have it, and the United States is backing Israel, and Iran will not back down on that basic issue.
Are we talking about a 20% enrichment of uranium? Above that, is anybody okay over there to allow them to have civilian? They already have civilian plants operating. I visited one.
We have offered them whatever materials they need for their medical purposes, because that is a part of the medical.
Well, then you need enrichment, enriched uranium.
But we can provide it to them, okay? What we don't want is to have a system whereby they can clearly and use subterfuge to go from whatever it is to 20%. We have to have some kind of monitoring here in order to make sure this is for real and not another fake
negotiation. If they were allowed enrichment and they would hold it to 20%, as they seem to be guaranteeing they will do it.
No, it's not the 20%.
Would that be verifiable, and would that satisfy Israel so that they could enrich to that extent, which they can now do? And they're now doing it, I believe.
They are enriching it, but they're not supposed to enrich it to that level of 20%. That's not where.
What should the level be?
I think about 4.5 or 5. That's where it is.
I thought it was between 5 and 10 somewhere.
But it's certainly a lot lower than it's a lot, and we've agreed to provide them whatever they don't.
Foreign policy issue in this coming election, is there one that you can conceive of coming across?
Well, I always think of former Defense Secretary Rumsfeld, who talked about there are known knowns, and then there are known unknowns, and then there's what we really don't know. The road ahead is full of lots of ifs, but unless there's some sort of foreign policy crisis, this is an election about jobs and the economy. And what the president has done is successfully neutralized what has always been a Republican advantage on foreign policy and national security. He's been really tough to the point where he gets criticism from, for example, former President Jimmy Carter, that he's violating human rights with the drone attacks. So I don't see it as a voting issue, but outside events can interfere.
The Attorney General has been characterized recently. Is that going to appear in this coming election? And does it have any lifting power? What am I talking about?
Well, I think there's a perception that certainly is true among Republicans that this is an administration that really doesn't care very much about the rule of law, and exhibit number one is the Attorney General. So yeah, I think you're going to hear a lot about Eric Holder, you're going to hear about Fast and Furious, hear about an administration.
What's the rap against Holder?
That he's not been forthcoming with the United States Congress about about Fast and Furious and the murder.
Conducting a cover-up is the rap against him, but he's not going to be in a second term, even if Obama wins.
Right.
So I think that's somehow going to one day moot this issue.
Do you think that they're okay with just letting this coast?
I think the Republicans would like. I think what
You
the
know
Democrats
that we
are saying,
have a
throw
man
a
by the
blanket
name
over
of-
until the election is over, and we'll
That's
deal
right.
with it after that.
You
remember, John? We did that in '72.
You remember
Yeah,
the
this-
chairman? You remember you know the name of the investigation body that's now sitting on this?
The House committee, the
ISA?
ISIS committee. Yeah.
ISA.
This is like
ISSA.
Fast
Yeah,
and
he seems very tenacious, and he's very skilled.
Yes, he is skilled, and he is furious at Holder. Because it's probably broader.
He's a committee chairman.
Yeah.
isn't he?
Yes, that's right, and he has
Does he
gone
have
after
power?
him. And well, they
They
just
cited him for contempt.
they just cited Eric Holder for contempt,
criminal
in the
contempt and
Congress.
civil contempt.
What happens now?
Nothing,
Does that just
nothing,
go away
nothing.
between now and the
Contempt
election?
goes to the Department of
Nothing
Justice guy in
happens.
D.C. He does nothing.
Yeah.
But the civil
Nothing
contempt.
Can he
goes-
get away with that?
Civil contempt goes to a
Do
judge.
you think the Republicans are going to let him get away with that?
Yes.
No, they
He's
won't.
withholding documents relating to
If-
Fast and
if-
Furious,
That
which is the
investigation's
transfer of
revealing
guns
more. That
over.
investigation's uncovering more
If it
truth.
goes-
I'm
if it-
arguing with the panel.
If it goes to a civil court proceeding, it could take years, and maybe there'll be some documents turned over.
Predictions, Pat.
Republicans have to win the Senate to overturn Obamacare. I predict they will.
Eleanor.
The contempt of Congress charge against Attorney General Eric Holder will go nowhere.
What do you think?
The unemployment rate on Election Day will be closer to 9 than 8.
What?
The opposition to the health care bill will grow and will be a major factor in the election coming up in November.
I predict the conservatives will be mobilized this fall more than they have been in the last 4, even 5 presidential cycles. Happy Independence Day. Bye-bye.
This is the AT&T Network, a living, breathing intelligence bringing people together to bring new ideas to life.
Look, it's so simple.
In here, the right minds from inside and outside the company come together to work on an idea, adding to it from the road, improving it in the cloud, all in real time.
Good idea.
It's the AT&T Network, providing new ways to work together so business works better.